Okay, so today I want to take you through this super quick and simple way to set up this flower in Kinefx. Let's have a look. Okay, so jumping directly into subs here. First of all, I just want to drop a grid, and I want to show you on a really simple flat surface how easy this is. I'm going to set the connectivity to columns. Now I want to rotate these guys around the x-axis, so I need the axis to rotate them up around and curl them. So I'm going to do just do a points up here, and I'm going to set the attribute to normal, and I want to set a constant value, and I want to get the x-axis, so I'm going to set that to 1. So now if I turn on my normals display, you can see I've got that direction there. And then we need to turn this into a bit of a rig, so we can just use a rig doctor, and this initializes the attributes for Kinefx. If I press enter over the keyboard, you can see I've got points in order on these lines, which is quite useful. And then I'm going to do a rig vop. You could use a wrangle, but I often like to use the rig vop when I'm prototyping stuff. I think it's just a nice quick way to visualize what you're doing. What I need to do is I need to run over all the points, so I'm going to set this up, this run over to points. Okay, let's just jump right into this rig vop. Now if you press enter on the keyboard, and let's just zoom in here a bit, what I can do is if I click on one of these points, you'll see it comes up with 2 extra points, and this is quite useful. So if you drag on the top one, you can see it says get point transform, and I've clicked on it and I get the bottom one. You can see it gets set transform. So this is basically the 2 nodes that operates on the points, so that you kind of setting or getting, let's say it's this way around, you're getting the point transform, and then you want to set it with whatever value that's in between here. Obviously we don't want to operate on one point, we want to operate on all the points. So let's just select both of these, and I'm going to set the signature to point number, and then what I need is my geometry global variables, and that just gives me this PT num, and I'm going to plug this in here, and I'm going to plug that to this PT there. So now I've got the basic setup for that's looking at all my points. Now I need a rotate, and we can just use a rotate first thing. That's a matrix that comes up. Can plug this, we want to affect the local transform, and we can just plug that right in there. Now we've got that axis that we've created with the normal, so what we can do is just plug our normal in directly into this axis, and then we've got an angle we want to set, so let's just do a promote parameter here and dive right out. Zoom out here a bit, and now if I just set this angle, you can see I get a rotation around this. And what would be quite useful now is obviously just to control this over a length. So as an interesting test, we could just use a mask. Let's say mask from target. I'm going to drop this in here, and let's set that there. And then if we go back into our rig vop, I'm just going to do a bind and get that mask. So it's called mask by default, and then I just want to double click on this angle node here to expose it, and I'm going to do a multiply, and I'm going to multiply this mask by that value. So now you can see I've got some other stuff happening up here. So if I just increase my mask radius, you can see I'm getting the rotations only being affected around that mask area, and I can just move this up and down, and gives you quite a nice look. So let's just minus this rotation, and I want to resample this, essentially give it more points, so we can, let's just up the rows here, the point numbers, and yeah, that's cool. So essentially that's what I wanted to show you. It's like super quick and quite nice to play with. Yeah, so let's move on to actually doing the flower and see how we can set up this on a slightly better setup. Okay, moving over to the side here. So I want to create the base for the flower, and for this I'm going to use a spiral, I'm just going to use the lav spiral. It's got less parameters. That's all what we need. Let's view this and zoom right in here. Okay, I'm going to start out. I just want to increase the loops. So let's make this 3 loops. And I don't want the spiral to go all the way to the center. So on this radius, I'm just going to bump out the center a little bit. The outside radius, maybe just make this 1 so it's a little bit more interesting. And then I just want to look at the point count here. It's quite high, so let's just drop that. Yeah, and then maybe let's just add a little bit of height here as well, just to create a bit more interest. Okay, so now essentially we want to copy lines outwards off these points, so we need to create a copy to points, but first we need obviously that line. I'm going to set this, put this line flat on the ground and set it along the z-axis for the copy to points to work properly. And then I want to do a resample, and for this I just want to use it for, okay, we can just enable the maximum segment, so we've got a specific amount of points we're using. And then I want to expose this curve view attribute, and if you remember on this previous setup we did this little mask which is controlling the fall off. Essentially I want to use the curve view to do the same thing along the petals. So let's just move on to this copy to points. Okay, connecting that in, let's connect this up and see what we get. This is obviously pointing in the wrong direction, so we need normals on the spiral. So I'm going to do another points up, and whoops, sorry, and then just set this normals in, but we want it kind of pointing out. So on this little drop down we can do a sverify in, and essentially what this is doing, if we just look at the actual normals, let's zoom in here and turn our normals on, we're getting the bounding box center of this of itself, and we take in the current position and minusing it, so we get these vectors pointing outwards. So let's have a look and see what that looks like. Now this is obviously, you've got some guys pointing down, and that's not ideal. So what you want to do is we want to point them up, and what we can do for that is actually just create an add node, and this is just creating a new point, a single point, and I want to plug this into the second input. And then on this node we can, instead of using the 0 here, which is the first input, we can use the second input, and I set that to 1. And now you can see I've got essentially, if you imagine these are the vectors, they're basically traveling directly looking at this point that I've set up here. So that just gives me quite nice control of the spread of the flower. Gives me like a decent base shape. Okay, so let's move on to some extra stuff. What I have forgotten about over here on this side is my little axis that we want to bend stuff around. So we essentially need this guy that we set up that end. So what I'm going to do is just copy and paste it in here, so we have it. And now if you look at this little setup, you'll see the normals are running around that direction, so that's kind of our axis we're going to bend around. And let's just go ahead and do a rig doctor, so we can initialize the rig. Oops. And then I want to do that rig vop, and well, I've got this rig set up that I'm going to use again, so instead of retyping everything out, or I might as well just use that. And then let's just dive inside, and let's replace this mask with the curve view that we've set up. So we can do curve view, spell it correctly. There we go. And now you'll see, if we look at, just press escape on the thing here, we've got this bend happening. It's kind of in the wrong axis though, so what it's essentially needing is the rig vop. We need an up axis as well to get the correct orientation. And on that, what I'm going to do is on this node here, the point node, I'm going to just add another expression, attribute expression, and then just do a sorry, I need to set this to custom, and I want to use up, and let's just set the value to constant, and I want the up axis on my Y direction, so we'll set that to 1, and now you'll see I've got these nice little curling, almost flower petals pointing in the right directions. So I'm going to set this right down. So now what we need to do is just add a little bit more interest and shaping to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy and paste this guy and drop him down, and then you'll see it automatically just adds extra to it, so which is quite neat. So you can actually just add a bunch of them together. In this case, what I want to do on this first one is I actually want to add a ramp in so I can control the shape of these bends. So if we dive right in, I'm going to put a ramp directly after this curve view, so we can control the curve view values. I need to set this to a spline ramp, and now let's just go out and we look at this ramp. So if we start out and we go, okay, that's my 0 to 1 value. If I up this, you can see I'm starting to bend down more. But now what happens if I drop this down? It starts kind of straightening out again. What you can actually do is take this into the negative value, and then that becomes quite interesting, because now you're getting kind of this almost little bell shape of the flower happening, starting to resemble kind of the shape of a rose, I guess, of sorts. Yeah, that's quite interesting. And then yeah, we obviously got this second VOP, and then you can control the overall bend of it. And then yeah, let's look at some skinning. So this is just a simple skinning method. You can set this, and let's just drop a normal so it looks a little bit better. Okay, so this is obviously just really a spiral. What you can do on the skinning, and this is super simple, is just on the skin thing you can set groups of n primitives, and you can just bump this up to quite a decent value, 15, 16, and you start getting individual petals, which is quite cool. So now we just play with this. So this is looking alright. It's a little bit uniform. So one thing I want to do is on these lines, let's go back to this copy to points, is vary the length a bit, and that will just help break up those edges. So we can do a attribute randomize, yeah. And for this we'll affect the p scale of the copy. So we do p scale. This is a single value because it's a float, so we're just messing with the first two values, and let's make this 0.9, and you'll see I've got a bit of variation happening there in the lines now. So now if I go back down to my skin, you'll see if I toggle this on and off, now I've got a little bit of an edge happening. And yeah, all you need to do now is animate. Cool. This is a little bit of a simple setup. In part 2 of the video, I'm going to break down the petals into a slightly better setup and add a little bit more variation into the petals and some noise, and we'll probably include a bit of a vellum sim in there as well. Cool, thanks for watching.